This project began when my wife decided that our old, gross, rotting planter boxes that came with the house we bought needed to be replaced. She's the smartest person I know, and is always right, so I decided to go ahead and build a new set. I decided to make these out of eastern white cedar because it does exceedingly well outside, not to mention it looks really beautiful. What you've been watching me do so far in this video is to take all of the individual cedar deck boards that I purchased and get them flat and straight so that I could start joining them together to make the wider panels that I would need for this project. I used biscuits to keep everything aligned during the glue up process, and then I set about laying out all my clamps on the floor of my shop and glued everything together. My goal was to make a bunch of panels that were somewhere around 12 inches wide. After all the glue had dried, I got out my number 4 Stanley smoothing plane and cleaned up the glue joint on one side of these panels. After I'd cleaned up one side with a hand plane, I set about putting all of the panels through the thicknesser to get everything nice and flat and smooth. Then I moved over to the miter saw to start cutting things to their final sizes. Then I ran everything through the table saw to achieve a nice uniform width on all of the pieces. Then I could finally move on to assembly. I used glue at all of the joints and some stainless steel pin nails just to secure things temporarily, and then I just used some stainless steel deck screws that I countersunk into the wood, and then I came back through after the fact and plugged all of those stainless steel screw holes with some cedar plugs that I made. These planter boxes aren't actually going to hold any dirt in them. They're going to be more or less faux planter boxes that conceal plastic planter boxes that go inside them. That way we can easily remove the plastic planter boxes every winter for planting and storage and whatnot. I needed a way to insert those plastic planter boxes inside of the wooden ones, so my idea was I would put some cleats inside of the wooden planter boxes and then have a gridwork of reclaimed pieces of teak rusting on those cleats that I could then lay the plastic planter boxes on. In these shots, you see me milling down all of the pine pieces that I'm going to use to make the cleats. Then I could go ahead and install all of the cleats in both the large and small planter boxes using glue and stainless steel 16-gauge brad nails. After I installed all the cleats, I needed to go ahead and plug up all of the screw holes that I made earlier when I assembled these pieces. So I grabbed a piece of scrap and a plug cutter on my drill press and made these custom cedar plugs. And then I went around to all the screw hole locations, put a little bit of glue in each countersink, and tapped in the plug. Then after the plugs had been installed, I went ahead and used a flush cut saw and then a block plane to smooth them down flush to the surface. I used a router with a round over bit and a block plane to go ahead and round over all of the top edges of the planters so that water would roll off of them. At this point in the build, I decided to take a little break from the actual planter boxes and focus on the supports that would hold them to the house. These boxes aren't going to be attached directly to the outside wall. They're going to be held up by some support arms that will be attached to the structure. To do this, I used some reclaimed cross arms from utility poles to make these pieces. They're mostly made out of Douglas fir, which works quite well outside. I missed a couple parts of this milling process, but basically they're just a small support arm that sticks out from the building with a recess in the back that will accept a stainless steel L bracket. Then I could install the reclaimed teak slats that will hold up the plastic planter boxes inside of the wooden ones. I secured these to the cleats with just one 16-gauge brad nail, mainly just to keep them from moving around. I think gravity is really going to do most of the work here once the plastic planter boxes are holding them down. Then it was finally time to go ahead and apply a finish to everything. I decided to go with some semi-gloss spar urethane. It does really well outside, it's very robust and water resistant. For the first coat, I thinned it about 50% with mineral spirits so that I could get some good absorption into the wood, and then we did 2 more coats after that at full strength. Then finally, I could go ahead and install these bad boys on the house. I went out and I removed the gross old rotted ones from the house, and the first thing I had to do was go ahead and install the supports. That involved screwing some stainless steel brackets to the house where I wanted the supports to go, and then screwing supports to the stainless steel brackets. Then each planter box would sit on top of the brackets, and I secured them to the house as well with just 2 stainless steel screws in the top corners, just so that they couldn't accidentally be knocked off the supports. Then finally, we could put the plastic planter boxes inside of the new wood ones and sit back and admire our work.